Stronger than the fear of the unknown is the desire to make it known. The United States Air Force Test and Research Facility at Groom Lake, Nevada, commonly known to the public as Area 51, remains one of the most secretive places on Earth. As a result, it has captured the imagination of many and makes for a pretty fun setting, especially with anything concerning extraterrestrial life. As far as what's been declassified is concerned, the reality is a lot more down to earth, with the installation being used for experimental aircraft testing. But aliens, though. Area 51's a familiar face to science fiction media, usually holding evidence like bodies and extraordinary technology, and in some cases serves as a battleground during invasions. The arcade rail shooter, made by Atari, is one of the best known examples in video games, being both extremely prevalent in arcades throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, as well as having a reputation of being an overall fun game. Midway acquired the rights to the franchise from Atari when they went under, and set out to make their own game.
It was supposed to be a routine mission. We go in, identify the biohazard, clean, and get out. We'd experienced hot zones before. We've had to use force before. But this was different.
Area 51 by Midway Studios Austin is a first-person shooter available on PS2, Xbox, and PC, and is completely unrelated to the arcade games. I'm playing the PC version because, hey, it's actually freeware now, thanks to the United States Air Force? They had a deal where they allowed users to download 3 games for free with advertising, the other 2 being The Suffering and Rise and Fall: Civilizations at War. However, the advertising server is dead, so the most recent patch for the game removes it, and the multiplayer browser is dead because, much like anything from the aughts, GameSpy. Funnily enough, this does have a source port called Project Dreamland, but I couldn't get the thing to work due to file validation. I also read it requires an online connection even for single player, and for a game from 15 years ago, I'm not about that. The regular version runs fine, but I highly recommend downloading the FOV fix because I am also not about 60 degrees in any resolution, especially widescreen. PC Gaming Wiki is everyone's friend. Fixing that leaves one of the most aggressively 2005 shooters I've played in years, which isn't a bad thing, but it is a very defined feeling. I am going to struggle holding back comparing this to many shooters of 2004 to 2006 and rate it as its own thing, so please bear with me. It is of average quality overall, doing some things right with some things being annoying, leaving you with feelings of having played a video game. That's about it, it's painfully average. You take up the role of Specialist Ethan Cole, part of a hazmat team sent into Area 51 to report on and clean up after a virus breaks out and begins to infect the scientists and military personnel stationed there. The virus begins to mutate the infected, making them into monsters and attack anyone who isn't. As expected, you start out with a team, but find them getting picked off one way or another until you're left fighting alone in the underground portions of the facility, trying to make it back to the surface. Standard fare for this kind of game. You find your way into a mess of conspiracies, all while blasting anything that looks in your direction. What isn't standard is the first act concludes with Cole being almost killed and instead mutated himself, Eat Your Heart Out Quick 4. From there, it becomes his goal to find the lead scientist behind the experiments in order to rid himself of the virus and eliminate the alien threat. The first major attraction that the game calls attention to is the cast, priding itself on having some big names aboard. David Duchovny of, well, you know, provides the voice of Cole, mainly speaking as the narrator during cutscenes and level transitions. I think there's only one time he actually talks to somebody in the entire game. He doesn't sound bored, but he's very tired in just about every narration.
McCann talked about cover-ups, but I always thought the government was too inept for hoaxes this complex. In this den of lies, will I ever find the truth? Does it matter? It all seems so pointless now.
Joining him as Major Bridges, his commanding officer, is Powers Booth, whose name I wasn't initially too familiar with, but upon doing some research found out he was the voice of Gorilla Grodd in the Justice League cartoon. Bridges is your one-and-done military man, and Booth delivers the performance this kind of character demands. Very stern.
He's compromised the elevator and blew up that transport truck. There's no telling what he'll try to destroy next.
The third top-billed voice actor is none other than Marilyn Manson, who plays Edgar, a telepathic Grey speaking to Cole as guidance after he's been infected. I liked Manson's performance.
Cole, your blood runs dark and diseased.
There are a number of other voice actors, some more recognizable than others.
You guys be careful out there.
Access granted.
Being one of my favorite VAs, it's admittedly always fun to hear Josh Keaton.
That's one. Two. Oh, son of a bitch! Best 2 out of 3?
but I feel Ian Abercrombie deserves some attention for his role as Dr. Cray. He's quite good.
Humble. My mark has been made, and even you cannot wipe the effects of its legacy.
The writing's about what you'd expect, standard, competent, and pretty direct. Even as the plot gets thicker, you can't really lose the main idea of what's going on, but you can lose yourself to the details. Scattered throughout the levels are top-secret files and other miscellaneous objects you scan with your analyzer, giving depth to the world of Area 51. This entails confirming some of the most common conspiracies, and some a little less common, as well as providing lore and details on the technology being employed. As serious as the tone is, it's not without a sense of humor. I had a chuckle. But the main thing about a game is how it plays, and like I said, it's completely average and what was expected of the time. Levels aren't very long and are fairly linear, with explorable crevices hiding away goodies and some of the reading materials. There's 18 stages, with each clocking in around 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how stuck you get in a few firefights. For the most part, if you're used to shooters, you'll be fine, as health syringes are scattered plentifully around the environment, and being bright green makes them easy to spot. I played on medium and encountered little to slightly above little resistance up until the final levels, but I'll get to that in a bit. Most of the enemies early on will just rush you with melee attacks and go down in a few shots. Some carry guns and will return fire, but die just as easily. The moment you start to encounter the bargain bin variants of the soldiers from Fear is when the shooting starts to become more engaging, but maybe not as much as you'd want. Maybe this is fixed on hard difficulty? I wouldn't know. Hard is locked until you beat the game once on normal. The guns are good and do their roles well. The starter pistol is quite strong, killing most enemies in 2 or 3 shots. It'll last you throughout the game as a good backup for when your primary gun needs to be reloaded, as well as just mopping up 1 or 2 bad guys. The SMG, or SMP, is good for bunches of enemies, as a short burst is all it takes to drop a mutant. Also, it can be dual-wielded, which works in a fairly unique manner. You pick up an extra gun and have double the ammo count, but fire both at the same time. However, once your magazines are empty, you drop the spare and are back down to 1 gun after reloading. The shotgun solves the half-life problem of why a SPAS 12 can shoot a double blast by adding a second barrel. Also, this version is semi-auto like the real one, and you can dual-wield this one too. Unfortunately, using the primary fire isn't as strong as you'd like, but seems to have a consistent damage output to the mid-range of killing in 2 or 3 shots. There's also a sniper rifle, and it functions as you'd expect it to, nothing out of the ordinary. The 3 alien weapons are where things change up. The BBG is an infinite burst fire sticky bomb launcher that can be drained of energy, but will always recharge to full with time. You think this would make it the ultimate weapon to use, but I found it more useful as a backup when my other guns ran out of ammo. It became mandatory in the last few levels after I found myself starved for bullets and shells, and in a bad position for some shootouts. The second is the Mason Cannon, the BFG equivalent, launching a large energy projectile that creates arcs of electricity upon contact with either an enemy or a surface. Ammo for this is very scarce as expected, but it is fun to use on large groups. The final is a different type of explosive, the JB grenade, which flies in a straight line and makes a small vortex to do a decent amount of damage. It can be upgraded to have a homing feature and is one of the best weapons to use on one of the types of enemies, the Greys. We'll get to that in a moment. The big standout here is the mutant gameplay. At will, you can switch between human and mutant provided you have enough mutagen depicted in this meter next to your health. While in mutant form, time runs slightly slower and your primary attack is the melee dudes, which also replenishes your mutagen supply. Soon after getting this form, you unlock the ability to shoot parasites which home in at the cost of some of your meter. You unlock one more attack, shooting the virus, which will make the affected turn on their comrades and eventually die. And honestly, I found myself using this form not as often as the game wanted me to. Maybe I should have, but I enjoyed mindlessly blasting away monsters more than activating the same animation over and over and running up to punch. Most of Area 51's opposition is once again stock for this kind of game. Melee enemies, infected humans, the headcrab analog, and some mass-produced soldiers. Less common are these annoying amoeba things that just get all over the place, splitting into smaller blobs when shot until they go away. There's 2 boss fights, which is one boss fight but repeated a second time with a new arena and some new attacks. But these big guys are kind of pitiful to fight. Strafe running is an effect in this game, so you can outrun them heading diagonally, and they rarely use their projectile attacks, opting to either jump on you or crash into you. The final enemy type you face are the Greys, which, as far as presentation is concerned, pass with flying colors as background observers. Cole says it best.
There's a calmness when you're in the presence of these aliens, but you'd be an idiot to trust them.
I absolutely love how when you first see them, they slowly approach the window to watch you, staring peacefully, yet eerily. As you explore the area, they're off doing their own thing, on occasion looking back at you for a few moments before resuming their tasks. When finally given the opportunity to gun them down, I actually didn't. I let them teleport away safely so I could fight more soldiers with a clear conscience. And then the first gray fight happened. They don't fight you directly, instead summoning their soldiers to fight you endlessly until you kill the Grey. Fitting, but this isn't easy as they have 3 levels of shield protecting them. You have to multitask and balance killing the mobs while attacking the Grey, which can get tricky and lead to death. I wasn't in the best of positions as far as health and ammo were concerned during the first one, and had to rewatch the stupid cutscene over and over again due to the checkpoint system. There's 4 instances I remember fighting these aliens, with the last one having 2 Greys and surprisingly being the most generous with supplies. At the end, when you're escaping, there's one last Grey that's non-combative, but I took the lesson I learned to heart and splattered the little bastard. Music is ambient and changes based whether or not you're in combat with different variations, but didn't really grab my attention. What did was the environmental design. Seriously, props. The levels have a fantastic art direction, and there are many areas that do stand out, even if the levels themselves not as much. Area 51 passes at the class average, and if you find yourself wanting an FPS from the mid-2000s to kill a Saturday or Sunday on, you can do a lot worse. As I pointed out, a lot of it is standard fare for the specific period of the FPS genre. Sometimes it beats other games to the punch on things, but not necessarily doing them in a standout way, for better or worse. It's fine. But clearly its predecessor had more staying power, as when announcing to my friends which game was next, the reply was, "What, the arcade game?" Thank you for watching, and rest in peace, Midway. This video was made because a couple of buddies and I wanted to work with the theme and each do something on our own. This theme was abandonware that A, looked interesting, and B, wasn't just a shit game to laugh at. Their videos are linked in the description, or if I figure out end title cards, they're gonna be right up here too, and I recommend checking them out. I'd like to do this again at some point. It was fun.
The philosopher Sartre once said, "Hell is other people." He was only half right. My mind and body have been altered beyond reason. I don't know who or what I am anymore.